I got an interesting email from somebody who was not involved with this at all. He just passed me this link to a Reddit post. So this is going to be a non-hand call, but it's not going to be dealing with a caller. So in this particular Reddit post, this was a hand that was a PLO 5 hand. So let's just go through the hand here in a second, and then we'll talk about what happened. So in this Reddit post, the setup is 2830 effective, PLO 5. I don't even know where it was played at. Pre-flop, limp, hero in MP to 60. Or excuse me, villain in MP to 60. Hero calls on the button. Hero calls on the button with ace, deuce, 3, 4, 10 with nut diamonds. And then they go 4 ways. The pot's $270. The flop comes out ace of clubs, king of diamonds, 5 of spades. Check, check. The guy who raised pre-flop pots. The Reddit poster said this guy was the biggest nit in the world and immediately thought that he had ace-ace. But he called with an interior wrap draw and backdoor nut diamonds. So now the pot's 800. Hero calls only and it's heads up. Ace, king, 5. Hero with ace, deuce, 3, 4, 10. The turn's the 9 of diamonds. So now hero picks up the nut diamond draw. Pre-flop raiser, pots again for 800. Now the hero definitely thinks the guy has pocket aces. He calls, nut diamonds, interior wheel wrap. Pot's 2400. The river's the 8 of diamonds, and the hero makes the nuts. The guy checks. And hero pots him all in for 1700. Okay, so why is this a non-hand call? Well, let's bring up the post, and I will read it here. The river is the 8 of diamonds. The board is ace, 5, king, 9, 8. I have ace, 10 of diamonds. I have the nuts. Guy's got 1700 behind. He ponders for a while and checks. I act like I have a decision and then just jam for the stack. Dude goes into the tank. People start getting restless after the 3rd minute. You can tell they're ready to call the clock. He makes a motion to pitch in his cards like a million times. He's so close to folding. I'm praying for a call, so I start talking to him because I can tell he's fixated on folding. I ask him, "What do you have? You got the aces, don't you?" He smiles sheepishly and says, "That's obvious, huh?" He then says, "Sorry guys, this is why I'm taking so long," and he tables his 5-card hand face up, and it contains, shockingly, ace-ace. Like we didn't know. Now, I know his hand isn't dead when he tables his hand like this, but I act like I think his hand is dead, and I go, "Wow, bro, that's a disciplined fold." I then flash deuce 3, 4 and let out, "Whew." He then goes, "I haven't folded yet. I can still make this call." The floor gets called over. I say to the floor, "This gentleman tabled his hand for everyone to see and would like to know if his hand is still alive." The floor says yes. The player then makes the call and loses. I tell this story to a few poker friends and get mixed responses. It's a game of deception. He could have deduced that I was fishing for a call. The guy got played. I'm ready to get bashed by people. Let's hear how scummy a person I am. Now, what we later find out actually in the post, the guy, whoever wrote this up, if I had just read this, I would have interpreted this like the actual guy who won the hand called the floor over and was putting a big act on. But apparently, in the comments, he said that the guy whose decision was on with the ace-ace was the one that called the floor over. And then there's a big discussion about, is this scummy? Is this an angle? Is it an angle? What is an angle, by the way? I actually asked Michael G, what is an angle? Another comment here from Reddit, what is your definition of an angle? I asked Michael G. He brought this up, which I think was another comment in this thread. Fairly decent definition. Angling is when you follow the letter of a rule while violating the spirit of the rule, intentionally breaking a rule beyond mere deception, even though the rule gets enforced and it is angle shooting. Claiming a rule is something other than it is, goes beyond mere deception, it's angle shooting. Thus, acting out of turn intentionally is an angle. Intentionally string betting is an angle. Intentionally declaring a bet different than the chips thrown in is an angle. Intentionally claiming an opponent violated a rule when you know better is an angle. In each case, you are depending on others enforcing a rule against you. That's a pretty good thing, and I think that all of those things, especially the one with like betting the chips and declaring something else, like that is an angle. This one's, I would say, is kind of scummy, and I think who cares people are so fixated on what is an angle. Did you angle? Did you not angle? It's like this whole other thing. People are obsessed with whether or not they got angled or not, when there isn't even necessarily a consensus on what the definition is. I mean, certainly this guy the hero didn't necessarily break any rules. Is it within the spirit of the game? Is it sort of scummy? Yeah, borderline, I would say. I think the most important part of this is how do other recreational players probably look at you in the game. Like, I would never pull this like on a rec player, I would say. You would, and obviously somebody had to be a rec player to fall for that shit. But I would never pull this on a recreational player, and you might get yourself kicked out of like big games if you pull this type of thing. Now, is it deception? Do you have a right to do whatever you want? I suppose I kind of go back to that whole thing where the guy, the big, funny, like interesting, probably one of the funniest calls, or whatever, most interesting calls that we've ever had on the show, when the guy four barrel bluffed the guy. When he triple barrel bluffed, the guy called him, he lied about his hand, getting the other guy to fold, to muck his hand, and then he showed that he lied to the guy's hand. And some people were like, that's part of the rules. And other people were like, no, it's not. No, it's not. So I would definitely look at a guy differently if he did this. I remember back in the day, there was a situation, and I know this call-in show gets listened to by a lot of people. So if anybody knows Kenneth James, and this can get back to him, maybe he can fill in exactly what happened in the comments. But this must have been 20 years ago. We were playing in a 5-10 game. And the villain in this hand, we used to call him Filipino Tony. He wasn't Tony the Rat, the really short guy that I used to make fun of on Live at the Bike, but this was a guy that his head was shaped like a long-term cigarette smoker, if you can kind of like figure out, like almost like a triangle head, like triangle circular head. He was kind of a scumbag / angler. And he'd pull all kinds of moves and stuff like that. And one time, Ken and James got into this hand with this guy, where this guy, I think, checked, and Kenna made this ridiculous all-in bet. Like, just so far, like 100 times the size of the pot. Something like that. And as soon as he did it, his face turned white. Kenneth James, like, he looked like a ghost. And he was like, all in. Oh my God, is he still in the hand? Call the floor. I call the floor over. Floor proceeds to come over. He says, I couldn't see that he was still in the hand. He's hiding his cards. Look at the way he's hiding his cards. How could I possibly see that he's in the hand? His cards are like around the chips. You know, I moved all in, but I didn't know that he was in the hand. He makes this huge deal about the fact that he can't see Filipino Tony's cards. And Filipino Tony said, I was still in the hand. I'm still in the hand. So blah, blah, blah. The floor guy, he rules. He says, sir, he's still in the hand. I'll give him a warning to show his cards better, but the action is on him. He still has an option. And Filipino Tony calls like, whatever, the $5,000 bet into $100 on a board of like, I don't know, like 7, 6, 5. And then Ken James sheepishly turns over 8-9 for the nuts. And Tony had flopped something like 2 pair. Now, Ken James is not an angler himself. After that hand, he made it very, very clear to everyone, told everyone that Filipino Tony had angled him like the week before, and that he was due for one to come back to him. And Kenna raked in this gigantic pot. That was a different type of situation. But I've seen this move before. I've seen this type of move before. I don't know why people have to play that type of game that the Reddit poster played. I've seen worse angles, I would say. It doesn't matter whether I think it's an angle or not. Again, we'll put a link up to the video. Is this an angle? The poker bunny thing. And also the J-Dog thing. We got a couple of calls from Texas. J-Dog, that was an angle. If anybody hasn't seen that, click on the link. It's probably our highest performing video ever with J-Dog, who got involved with a guy who didn't really speak English all that well at TCH in Austin, by the way, and sort of convinced the floor that his opponent allowed him to see one of his cards. Basically, this guy moved all in, so the action was on J-Dog. J-Dog had a decision, and J-Dog was like, whoa, you can see one of my cards. The action was on J-Dog. The other guy was all in front of him. So the guy turned up one of J-Dog's cards, and then J-Dog's like, whoa, because you turned over one of my cards, I can turn over one of your cards. The guy moved all in. The action was on him. And he turned over one of his cards, and he ended up making the call. That was really brutal. But again, I think this all comes down to the fact that, like, how do other people look at you, and how is this going to affect your standing in the game? I will always give recreational players sort of the benefit of the doubt if they somehow make a mistake for the overall health of the game. So I could never imagine pulling something like this in a PLO5 game against a guy that, might be a break even to a losing player. But people live life in different ways. That's just my opinion. I don't think it needs to be done.